What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Podcast. Today we are joined by Saif Ishoof. We've been after him for a while, and it's finally a pleasure to have him on. Saif, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Anthony, Gabriel. I'm very excited to be on here with you guys. I'm a big fan of the Mindset Podcast, and I'm ready to chop it up with you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you so much. And in true mindset fashion, we first have to get through our lightning round of warm up questions. So the first one we have here, and this one's really interesting. Gabe and I were talking about it off air. If you had a time machine, would you go back in time or in the future?
That's a great question. I believe we're still building the future, so I would go back in time, and I would specifically want to jump to the golden age of Spain, which is in the mid 8th century, because there was more unity at that time between the world's major religions, between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And you had more scientists, scholars, mathematicians that were collaborating, building universities and libraries. So I would want to be right back in España in the 8th century, chopping it up with some of the scientists, scholars, astronomers, and others. That's where I'd want to be at.
That's a really interesting time to be in, right? I feel like Anthony and I, I mean, even you, I'm sure we read about those types of people in our history classes and stuff, but to actually watch it and to be in it in the flesh, I can't even imagine what that experience might be like. I'm same as you. I feel like if we were to travel into the future, I feel like we're in the future already, right? With all these things happening, who knows what, the next 10, 15, 20 years might look like. But if I had to, I'd ask that question a million times to myself. And I'm a huge basketball fan. Wasn't old enough to watch the Allen Iverson, Michael Jordan era. I would love to go back in time and watch those guys, even back in the
Love
90s with
that. So
Magic Johnson. Yeah,
I'm going to go off script for a second and share a funny story that I
please
actually
do.
went to college with Allen Iverson. And yeah, and Allen it was just a year behind me. And
Wow.
so, yeah, I went to undergrad at Georgetown, and my sophomore year was Iverson's freshman year at Georgetown. So I
Wow.
got to watch AI play in the flesh for one of the most legendary basketball coaches of all times, Coach John Thompson
Mm.
Sr. Rest in peace. And I had a chance to chop it up with Alan a couple of times. Just a really extraordinary athlete, phenomenal journey. So yeah, that era of basketball were some of the greatest players. Not to be confused with the energy and excitement of today's players as well.
Absolutely.
You can't not be excited by what's happening in whether it's Giannis or LeBron or all the other, or, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler,
Yeah.
our squad at the Heat. So
Let's
I
go.
agree with you. That was a great time in basketball.
Yeah. Wow. I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be in that arena watching him play as a freshman. I mean, that whole Iverson fever was nuts. And he really set not only the culture for basketball, but he really, revolutionized the way we see hip hop and culture and, that society and that generation. But that is really, really cool.
Allen was a
Our,
boundary pusher. He still is,
yeah.
and someone that really went beyond the defined role of the archetype, which I think that's part of what mindset's all about. The idea that I know we're going to talk more about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't wait to get more into that. But before then, before we get into the meat of things, we have one more question of our lightning round. And this one is also pretty exciting. Don't know what it's gonna be. But the next question is if you could change places with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
It's a great one. If I could change places with anyone in the world, who would it be and why? Um, who
That's a
would
tough one, isn't it?
That's a really great one. I love these questions that are stumpers. Um, I would want to change places with maybe an entrepreneur or a social impact leader in maybe West Africa, maybe
Mm,
someplace in Nigeria or Ghana. Because
mm,
if you understand global demographics, you understand that the second half of the 21st century, uh, one of the most consequential geographies in the world is going to be Nigeria. Nigeria is going to be the next country to hit 1 billion people. And
Mm-hmm.
so, very much like what we've seen in Asia with the rise of China and India over the last 20 and 30 years, I think we're going to see a lot of those trend lines evolve in West Africa, all throughout the continent. So, I'd want to change places with somebody that's a social impact leader, that's maybe revolutionizing healthcare or rethinking what the financial inclusion looks like in a population like that. Because if I could just get a glimpse of insight from what those folks are building, I think it's gonna. You can't crystal ball into the future, but whatever a leader is building in a space like that, I think I would take away a lot of learning. So that's where I'd want to jump to. I know that's kind of an
Mm-hmm.
oddball answer, but I really mean that.
Yeah. And have you ever been to any part of Africa before?
I've had a chance to visit North Africa,
Mm,
and it's a big desire of mine. I'm a huge history buff, so
mm,
it's a big desire of mine to visit East Africa, as well as, of course, West Africa, um, and of course, going further into the continent. But
mhm,
yeah, I've been to North Africa. I've been to Egypt. I've been to Morocco. It's definitely, and I have a dream if my
mm.
aging body allows me to do a hike at Mount Kilimanjaro at some point. So maybe I'll do
Okay.
that before I hit the big 50. But yeah, I've not been beyond those
Hmm.
couple of countries.
Interesting, because I know, and I just heard about this the other day too, that Africa and certain areas of Africa, there's a lot of entrepreneurial growth happening at a rapid pace, like you alluded to just a second ago. So that'd be very interesting. We've never gotten an answer like that before, and we've asked this a few times, but definitely the most interesting one. I'd give you that. So awesome. We got to know you a little bit more, and now we can jump into getting to know you and what you do. A lot of people know you, some people don't. Gabe and I know you, of course, as an iconic piece of the Miami movement that we're in right now. But why don't you share with us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Thank you so much, Anthony and Gabriel. I'll give a version of the journey for the podcast, and I'll start with that. I proudly say that I was born in the Caribbean, made in the 305. So I'm a proud
Let's go.
immigrant. I'm from Guyana. I landed in Miami when I was about 2 years old with my family, with my parents and siblings, and so I've got a deep love and passion for all things Miami. I joke with my kids that if you cut me, I'll bleed guarapo. And so and of course, all parts of the Miami landscape of culture. So most of my really seminal experiences as a young person were defined here in Miami. There's a great book by a gentleman by the name of Nicholas Griffin who wrote a book called The Year of Dangerous Days that really talks about 1980 as a portal through which you can understand the making of the modern Miami. I grew up, that's kind of the backdrop to my life as a young person, having arrived here in Miami in the late 70s. I had an opportunity to go away to undergrad in DC. I kind of view myself as a citizen diplomat. And so I studied at Georgetown School of Foreign Service. I came back after college, worked for a little while, and then I went to law school at the University of Miami. I was always passionate about technology, and so when I graduated, along with a childhood friend, built a vendor management software company. Had the opportunity to see what the life cycle journey is like in startups. And just for context, that was 22 years ago. So a lot of people talk about the Miami tech ecosystem maybe through the lens of the last decade. I had the good fortune of being able to see it. What did it feel like to build a tech company here 22 years ago? And even at that time, there were founders, and my parents had friends that were early engineers at IBM's campus in Boca or signals engineers that worked at Motorola. There was already an ecosystem here. It looked and felt very differently than what we know today or what's evolved in the last decade. Um, I continued my journey in a couple of different stops, had an opportunity to lead a major social impact organization called City Year. I was the founding executive director, and then was recruited to serve as a VP of engagement at FIU, where I had an opportunity to build high octane public private partnerships with large businesses, public sector entities. And then about a year and a half ago, I was on the heels of the momentum of my great friend, Mayor Francis Suarez, after the mayor had the tweet that went around the world we had a conversation, and the mayor invited me to serve as his senior advisor for innovation and technology. So I went on loan from the university to the city of Miami to help support Mayor Suarez in standing up the portfolio team that's now known as Venture Miami. But across the journey that I've been on, I think that there's a common element. One has been my passion for how innovative technologies can transform our world. Also, my belief that the public landscape, social fabric, human connections really matter. And then finally, what is the supersized role that rising talent can play in closing that divide? So I've been able to do a lot of different things over the last 22 years. And I kind of have been able to culminate all of that into my latest stage back in the private sector with launching. Everybody knows the rocket ship emoji in town, and our company Lab 22C, where I have the good fortune of advising a small port. I take a venture capitalist approach, a portfolio management approach to a small subset of venture backed companies, as well as a couple of traditional businesses, and helping them with people, talent, and culture, and helping them get situated to what's going on in Miami Tech. So that's my journey over the last, basically from when I landed in this country to where I am now. And along the way, my wife Amira and I have two beautiful children who are teenagers, Rania, who's 15, and Nabil, who's 14, who themselves are deeply ensconced in what's going on in the Miami tech ecosystem. But that's my greatest joy and greatest point of pride is seeing my own children as well as other young people reach their full human potential.
That's amazing, Saif. And as you were speaking, I could just tell, growing up in Miami and through all the successes that you might have had and all the leadership positions that you've been in, one common denominator that I find in all those positions that you might have held is that you still remained grounded in who you were and what you believed. Even now, talking about how much your children mean to you, that father figure aspect that you really want to embody. That's something that for some people they reach a high top, a mountain of success, and it might overtake them, right? And I want to ask you, this isn't even on the questions that we sent you, but what is something that you can maybe tell someone in their early 20s, maybe late 20s, that you could already tell that they're going to reach that high top of success? What can you tell them to make sure that they can stay grounded in what they believe and who they are and stay humble to serve others?
I would say, and it's easy, right? My wife and I oftentimes describe it as the sentiment of losing yourself, right? And I think that what I would say to a rising talent is remember the people who sacrificed to make your journey possible. Like think about them. Think about that grandmother or that older aunt or uncle or neighbor or teacher, somebody who did something extraordinary to make it possible to be where you are today, and try to focus less on what you can accomplish and more about how your work and your impact can honor them, because we all are a function of people who are long since gone, who did extraordinary things to make our path possible. And the minute you feel like you're flying too close to the sun, it's important to reflect and remember those individuals, those loved ones. It might have been a soccer coach and a team that we played in who saw something that we didn't see in ourselves. And so once we start to feel like we might be getting a little bit too full of ourselves, like dial back into that. I think that that can help us recenter ourselves. And so I think about that often. It also helps, I'll say, as you get further in the journey, teenage kids can absolutely make sure that your humility is in check, right? So I have that. Not only do I reflect on my ancestors and family members who've done a lot to make my journey possible, but a 15 and 14-year-old, they'll check you really quickly and make sure that you are on, as the phrase in Latin goes, on terra firma. You are on firm ground.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think that's so true to what you're saying, just to stay grounded. And I again, and even in the position that I'm in, sometimes as a young professional in this industry, in this Miami movement, right, that we're talking about, a lot of people can feel this pressure to be successful, even whether you're in Miami, whether you're in New York, California, wherever you are. We're living in this technological society that we have all these resources at our fingertips that it's almost hard, not to do something with. So I really think that's really some wise words for some people, rising in this industry. But I want to ask you, I want to go back to, maybe 12, 18 months ago, when that tweet around the world happened, right? When you were, by Mayor Suarez's side. What happened in to him, and what happened to you, in that moment, and what really, revolutionized this Miami movement? Like you mentioned, this has been around for over 20 years. You've seen this environment when you launched your first startup. Why now is it such a great time for people to really realize what is going on in Miami, and capitalize on it?
That's such a great question. And I think that it's sort of a 5 paragraph essay response. I'm not going to do that. I'll try to give the verbal equivalent of an Instagram infographic. But I think that there's a range of variables, right? So the first variable is that the pandemic ushered in what I'd like to call the decentralization of American innovation. In the same way that cryptocurrency represents the decentralization of finance, the pandemic prompted so many people who were in these traditional incumbent hubs that are so celebrated, like Silicon Valley and in the Boston area, New York, to realize that they could actually operate, live, work, and play somewhere differently. And then once they started to stick their head out from the early fog of the pandemic, right around summer to fall of 2020, they looked around and they realized that places like Miami have extraordinary things going on. We have great academic institutions like Miami-Dade College, like FIU, like University of Miami. We have great talent coming out of our school system. And so, at the moment of the tweet that went around the world, Mayor Suarez responded with this very Miami sense of a spirit of service. We all see it in Miami. Sometimes it's easy, we go on Only on Date, and I love Only on Date, but we see sometimes like the most ratchet of examples of what's going on in Miami, but we don't see, and I know that's a little bit of racheteria is within the mix. Probably gets what more views and likes on Only on Date.
Yeah.
The reality is, we all have that neighbor who, when we need their help, right, they're there to help us. Maybe fix up a bookshelf, or we all have an older family member that we see people going and picking up their prescription meds for them, right?
Mm,
So the Miami Tech movement, and as articulated and led by Mayor Suarez, it started with the spirit of service. How can I help? And
right.
so the pandemic decentralized American innovation. Mayor Suarez saw that Miami was so richly poised to be a space within which these founders and funders could build. And so out of that, you had pent up demand from all around America for a city that really, I mean, we like to say that in Miami, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not the kids'
Mm,
table at Thanksgiving. It's our core competitive advantage. Founders of
mm,
color, female investors, LGBTQIA plus folks. This is just who we are, right? We don't need
yeah.
somebody to define us like, oh, there's Saif, my brown Guyanese friend. It's like, I'm just
Mm,
Saif. I'm just their neighbor. I'm their buddy. I'm their colleague. Same thing
right.
with everyone else. So I think the confluence of those events made it so that other people finally were able to see what we know has been happening in Miami. And if you've been a startup founder and a builder in Miami, we were told for many decades that if you were serious about building a tech company, you had to move to the Bay Area, you had to move to New
Yeah.
York. And then, as
Mm,
a function of the pandemic, those folks landed here and they saw what, when Mayor Suarez defined it, he said, and look, in Miami, we're trying to be the capital of capital. And that
mm,
means not just financial capital, but human capital, social
mm.
capital, cultural capital.
I love
And if
that.
you go to some of these other spaces, that's not what was happening in those cities. So I think all of those events in concert at high speed contributed. And then a leader with lots of intentionality, founders that were willing to lean in, I think is what gave us that moment of launch.
Mm,
And we are still on that rocket ship. And it had been, many years in the planning before we actually put a human on the moon. And I think the
mm,
same thing could be said for the Miami Tech launch. We had the tweet that went around the world, but you had a lot of people like Manny Medina and others
mm,
that had been building high scale growth companies in this region. And so the tweet really
Mm.
help to spark that momentum, as well as the inbound of the capital and talent that aggregated in concert with the people who are here.
I think you're absolutely right. I think our superpower is our community, is the people of Miami. That's our superpower, and nowhere else in the world can they replicate that because we're just so unique. And of course, the vision that you and the mayor had, and you guys are leading the way definitely. And I want to ask you. You mentioned Miami-Dade College. I know you were very involved with FIU. You're involved in the community, the college scene here. How can Miami retain the homegrown talent? How can people like Gabe and I that were born and raised here in Miami, he goes to FIU, I went to Miami-Dade College, how can people like us, students, professionals, young professionals, stay in Miami? What can we do? What can the community do to retain that talent?
So I want to appreciate the fact that our local academic institutions are leaning in a big way to make sure that they're bridging connections between campus and career. I want to give a shout out to my friend and somebody that I admire deeply, President Madeline Pumariega of Miami-Dade College, because President Pumariega is a visionary in realizing that you have to blur the lines between campus and career. That's also happening at FIU. It's also happening at University of Miami and Florida Memorial University and with their school system. But I think that there's the work that's happening with the academic institutions and bridging that. But I think you're also getting extraordinary companies that are also saying we want in on this too, right? We're right now. I like to say in the 21st century and this moment we're in, and this might be one of those tweetable tweets that come out of our conversation, but we're essentially at a moment where there's an ocean of capital and liquidity, and there's a desert of talent. And so capital is in pursuit of an alpha, a return, in trying to identify that talent. And so it means that businesses now more than ever are willing to invest in rising talent. I advise a great company called Open Store, which is an e-commerce company that's building just a world-class a platform, and they're based right here in Miami in Wynwood. They're backed by Founders Fund. They're backed by Atomic, and we're actually doing on April 13th an open night, like an open store, open house night for rising talent, not just engineers, but for folks. And it's going to be at their offices, which is a cool spot at the Gateway in Wynwood on April 13th. So what you're seeing is businesses that earnestly want to bridge those connections. They want talent from this region. They want to create those relationships. Our academic institutions are playing their part. I think that these businesses are saying, we want Gabriel, we want Anthony, we want extraordinary founders here, like my friend Kanasha Paul and the work that she's doing with FIU's Venture Miami initiative that's focused on female founders of color, or my friend Janine Sua, or countless others that are really honed in on this. So businesses are raising their hand and they're saying, we want to invest in this frontier talent. And it's not just a marketing thing, it's really about their core competitive advantage. And I think that that's what is so remarkably different about this moment. And Mayor Suarez has really led that. In fact, on April 14th, Venture Miami is doing a hiring fair. It's the second time we're doing a hiring fair. It's at MDC's Wolfson campus,
Yeah.
thousands of open jobs. Some of the
Mm.
best companies will be represented there. And it's all about one thing: making sure that there is no gap between campus and career.
Mm.
That didn't happen in other regions. I mean, we're doing that again, Anthony, to your point. There's a
Yeah.
cultural piece. And,
Mm.
I'll get off my soapbox in a moment, only to say in Web3, oftentimes you see the hashtag WAGMI, WAGMI, and WAGMI stands for we're all going to make it. Well, I believe that we have to put the W into WAGMI. How do we ensure that the we is actually part of this moment? And I'm encouraged and optimistic because you're seeing leaders in institutions and in businesses that are recognizing that this is only successful if we're putting the W into the WAGMI of our Miami.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like Anthony mentioned, us both being Miami-Dade College alum, I currently go to FIU. We're seeing this firsthand, seeing this innovation happening before our eyes. And I think for all our classmates, our colleagues that we work with, that we are friends with, I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice not to realize the innovation going on, right in front of our eyes, and take advantage of the resources that you've mentioned, these different events that are like happening in our community, because people that are born and raised here, we have, the upper hand in a way, because, we are Miami, right? This is our culture, and we want to continue and strive for that. But Saif, I want to take a little switch here now with crypto, right? We couldn't have you on and not talk about crypto, and I really want to ask you, obviously, with everything you have going on with your company, Lab 22C. Before we even dive deep into that, why don't you tell someone? I understand crypto, pretty much the basics of it: crypto, NFTs, Ethereum, Bitcoin, all that good stuff. But for someone hearing about crypto for the first time, what is the simplest way of someone understanding that and comprehending that?
So I'm actually going to take a departure from answering that question because I think that the answer is there's a lot of great content that's out there that can explain blockchain technologies and the idea of a distributed ledger. I want to take a quick second to do something, which is to share how and why I got into crypto, and just to share that it happened because of the young people in my life. And by young people, I specifically mean my daughter Rania and my son Nabil. 7 years ago, when very few people in this community were thinking and talking about crypto, my kids participated in a computer science boot camp in kind of a sketchy warehouse run by two friends of mine that are hackers. And they did this workshop. I like to say that if my wife had seen the warehouse, she might have pulled up and then just driven off and said, "Okay, we're not doing this computer science boot camp." Although I do trust those two great
Oh my
hackers.
gosh.
And Rania and Nabil, over the course of the few days, they participated in something that's called the digital capture the flag exercise,
Hmm.
which is something that's done in cybersecurity. And they won. They won the competition, and they won a sizable amount of Dogecoin in
Hmm.
2015. And so I'm not allowed to say more because my son will say that it violates all of his cybersecurity protocols. They'll
Yeah.
jokingly will call themselves Dogenaires. But my kids, I was able to, I know, I was able to watch my kids, who at that time were 7 and 8, become infinitely curious about blockchain technologies and what was possible. And
Hmm.
over the course of the intervening years, they got a lot more curious about crypto and blockchain. And of course, as a function of the pandemic, during the lockdown, we're spending time getting way more curious. But I like to say, for anybody who's my age and older, uh, follow and listen to the curiosity of the young people around you, because the
Hmm.
journey to crypto for myself and for my wife started because of the curiosity of a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Hmm. Wow. Fascinating. Fascinating. And I know Nabil, I've especially follow him, and I've been seeing all the great work he's doing on social media and getting invited to speak. So he's a superstar in and of itself. So that's great. And I congratulate you for your children being so involved in this movement. And as we wrap up here, I have to ask you, what is your proudest Miami moment? I'm sure you have a lot of Miami moments and conversations that you've been a part of behind closed doors in the public and whatnot. What would you pinpoint as your proudest moment as being a Miamian?
Um, I have a lot of moments of deep pride as a Miamian. I'll tell you the moment that was really like the moment of launch for me was probably when I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Hmm.
When at that time, my family were relatively new immigrants to this country, and I had an opportunity. I was just at Friday prayers. As you know, my family, I'm Muslim, and I was at a
Hmm.
Friday prayer. Friday is like the Sunday for Muslim folks or Saturday for Jewish folks. So I was at a Friday prayer, and after the prayers were over, all the little kids ran out of the mosque and went outside, and everybody swarmed around this individual. And I walked up and looked at. I didn't know who this person was, and this individual was playing with the kids, smiling, laughing. I could see my dad was really excited. And what I then came to learn is that that was actually Muhammad Ali. And Ali has a deep connection and history to Miami. And Ali used to do this thing. Apparently, he's done it to millions of kids all over the world, where he'd pick you up and he would put you on his shoulder and he would tell you that you are a champ and that you are the greatest. And for me, I like to think that that's a moment of my greatest pride, because I saw someone who was part of my faith community, and as I'd come to learn, wound up becoming one of the most consequential leaders in our country in so many spaces, not only in athletics, but also in somebody who's a bridge builder of humanity, somebody who has been a role model for Black men in so many ways, even though my family is ethnically Indian, being able to look at that. For me, that was my moment of greatest pride. And as a Miamian, because it allowed me to see within myself, being able to meet a leader like that allowed me to see within myself what was ultimately possible in my journey. And so I've got an Ali quote that really is in many regards it's the soundtrack, it's the driving impetus to my life, and it's actually a quote that my wife helped to socialize to me, and that it's part of my Miami moment, and it's an Ali quote where he said, I hated every moment of training, but I told myself, don't suffer now, don't quit, and live the rest of your life as a champion. And so for me, that was my proudest Miami moment, because I believe it showed me that the inspiration that Muhammad Ali left in me and in millions of people should be a guiding light in the types of lives that we choose to live. And ultimately, can we be, none of us can be the champ, but can we be a beacon for those around us in the same way that Ali instilled in me a sense of hope and belief about what was possible for an immigrant kid like me to be able to accomplish in this beautiful city that we call the 305. That's my proudest moment in Miami.
That's so amazing. I can't even begin to, fathom what it might feel like to be in that moment. And, it really is refreshing to see people like Muhammad and other, even athletes in the space that are stepping off the court, stepping off the field, stepping out of the ring, and really making a difference in their community and setting the tone and paving the way for young leaders and young innovators in their community and in the world, really, because there's such, societal icons that we can look up to today. But with that being said, through all your leadership positions, everything that you've gone through, the Miami movement, you still have so much ahead. We cannot wait to see what else you get to do. But you mentioned that your kids were such a pivotal moment into you getting into crypto. What message would you give to next generation leaders to continue to pave the way and to, as you just hand over the torch, right? What can you tell them, and what can you, I guess, guide them into this community that we're growing and building?
My biggest advice for the rising talent is build community, invest in each other. If you have a friend and she's passionate about NFTs, or they are more knowledgeable about Decentraland or some other technology, create a WhatsApp group, create a Telegram group, use it as a learning space. Create what I like to call collision spaces. If you have a friend that's an artist, show up for them. So much of my journey, and my friends know me about this, like I've been able to learn so much over the years because I've been out there in the public square. And I know for our younger talent, it might be hard and costly, especially with the price of gas, to drive all the way to Wynwood. But tune in when somebody's doing a Facebook Live on something, or some other, a LinkedIn Live or digital space. Show up for other people and create learning spaces, because I'm part of a couple of extraordinary communities, both in crypto and tech, that are all virtual, right? They're not all secret handshake clubs, or you have to be some sort of Bitcoin whale to be a part of it. And so for anybody that's a rising talent, if you have to start with you and your buddy and your neighbor and their cousin, and you're creating a community, and it's just a few people to start with, that's fine. It doesn't matter. It's not about quantity. It's about quality, and it's about intentionality. And also show up for people, right? Honor your bond. When somebody invites you to something and you say you're going to be there, or if they ask for you to, hey, I'm doing a workshop, do you mind sharing it? Like, really be present for other people that are building, right? That's part of, we like to say in Miami, what's happening, this is a nosotros moment. This is not a us or they or you or them. This isn't all of us. And nosotros moment means that we have to really be present to see other people be successful. And for me, as I believe that the joy is you get to spend more time in this life as a coach than as a competitor. And so Mr. Miyagi has a longer shelf life than Daniel San has. And so I enjoy and I relish that because I get to move
Yeah.
into the coach's box and I get to
Mm,
see extraordinary talent, like like the two of you, like
mm,
my own children, my chief of
mhm,
staff Tanya, to see folks like my brother Jefferson Noel. I get to see these individuals now. I want to
mm,
see every single one of these leaders write the next chapter of what's going to happen in our city. And I think people who have occupied certain spaces and roles like myself, we have an opportunity to step back and to listen, to learn, and to evolve. And so that's my recommendation, not only for the rising talent, but for people who, if you've been in a positional authority role, maybe it's time for you to step back and play a role in a support way to see those around you, to let them
mm.
have the opportunity to lead from the front and learn from them.
Saif, thank you for sharing your story with us today. You inspire people like Gabe and I to share our story. And I know that's part of your message for us to all share our stories because we come from a unique place, every single one of us. And you inspire us and entrepreneurs alike. So thank you again for giving us all this wisdom, all these golden nuggets. I'm sure our listeners really appreciate that. And where can our listeners find you, reach out to you if they have any questions? I know you're very
So
active on
I'm,
LinkedIn.
definitely on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Check me out on Twitter at Saif305, but also follow what my team is building at Lab 22C. What's happening,
Mm,
and I'm just one part of the lab. I mean, the Lab
mhm,
22C is a much bigger team than myself, and so you've got brilliant minds, creators, innovators, even people who are doing stuff with culture. I'm not allowed to fully say it, but next week we're even doing something with Diplo. I'll probably get in
wow.
trouble, but I think maybe this podcast will come out after that event. But I say that I say that to say check out what we're doing at Lab 22C. I
Mm,
think that you'll see that we have taken a very different approach to what we're seeking to build, and who we want to be. I also want to say, as a value statement, I'm the only male member of the team at Lab 22C. It is
mm,
almost
wow.
completely a team of women of color, and so
Mm,
I want to make sure that I'm part of a team that's building a 21st century organization that doesn't have
mm,
to look like an archetypal form of leadership, but really one that's about
yeah.
a team led effort. We all have roles, so accountability is connected to it. But check us out at Lab 22C because they're doing all kinds of cool stuff that's happening on all social channels, and I'm grateful to be one part of a team that's seeking to solve big problems for the second
Mhm.
half of the 21st century. That's what the 22C stands for. At least that's one of the reasons. We keep everybody
Nice.
guessing
Ah.
what the full what is the full meaning of Lab
Yeah.
22C. Could it be
I love that.
cafecito? Could it be crypto? Could it be collaboration? But it's
It could be all
community.
three.
It could be
Awesome.
all of that. It's community. So thank you.
Awesome.
I'm such a big fan of what you, Gabriel and Anthony, are building. And we're on the heels of Miami Tech Month. So as we say in tech, let's go rocket ship.
Let's
Let's
do it.
do it.
Awesome. Saif, thank you again so much for just taking the time again to be part of our mindset family. And we always like to say that this isn't just an interview, it's not just a podcast, but now we're family, we're community. We would love to connect with you off the air and just see what other great
Let's do
things you're
it.
doing. And we'd love to come by and see what Lab 22C has to offer and share with our community too. But again, thank you so much. We deeply appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience is gonna take some value out of this. So
I'm going to take
appreciate
a
it.
picture with you guys before we go.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah, you can't. It doesn't happen if there wasn't a Syfy. So there we go. We got it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Saif.